Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Shed. I'm a micro farmer, family farm, also an ecologist and beekeeper. My family eats the food that we grow, and we also eat food that our local farmers grow. I support the local guidelines, having local guidelines be created that would allow small-scale family farmers to contract with locally owned mobile slaughter units that use and recycle all parts of the animal. The proposal that you're considering is not in the best interests of our communities and a diversified family farming system that would rely on clean water and property protection. Water quality and the quantity will continue to remain a pressing issue to our community. These facilities should be sited in rural, industrial, and industrial zoning areas as they are currently permitted. These zones offer better oversight for both sewage and water services and road accesses. Water is critical to life. It's critical to the health of our agricultural diversified farming systems. And these proposed slaughterhouse packing house facilities are known polluters of ground and surface waters. So I ask those of you who have an opening in your mind to reconsider your thinking on not allowing these types of slaughterhouse packing houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Dave Uncles. I live in Bellingham. I'm not here to complain about what you guys have done to the nice little ordinance that the Planning Commission recommended to you. But anyway, some of you, I think, toured an ag processing facility of a different sort in the recent past, and it's the centerpiece of a growing, family-owned agricultural enterprise in Whatcom County. It is very profitable. It employs lots of people. It's probably every bit of 30,000 square feet. I know the owners. It's located on GASP ag land. And one could only hope that somebody might build a packing house facility that would be equally vital and equally profitable and support as much employment.
Thank you. And seeing nobody else standing at the signs, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you all. What are the wishes of the council? Does the council want to take a break or just move right into it? Okay. Councilmember Man.
I'd like to start with just a question for staff, if I could. Just because we heard some competing testimony, and I'd just like to know about where slaughterhouses or packing houses could be located right now as the code is currently written. I know they're already prohibited in the ag zone. Are they allowed in light industrial lands as the code is currently written? Are they allowed in heavy industrial or high impact industrial lands as the code is currently written?
The only place in the code that it is clear where they are permitted would be the rim zone.
The rim zone?
Yes.
Not light industrial?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Knutzen.
Yeah, I'm going to be a while. It seemed like we heard a lot of things. First off, as somebody who has had animals butchered on their farm, a mobile slaughter unit, all the waste goes directly into the ground. How that is a better serving use, I don't know, especially in light of what's going on now at Kaiser's. I mean, all their waste now is going, for the most part, into a digester. and it's between 8 to 10,000 gallons a month is what they're using. So to say that this is going to be some huge draw of water, well, the examples I'm seeing so far, it isn't. You have to look at a $5,000 a gallon day draw on exempt wells. This would be less than 2 days use for the whole month. And then we heard some arguments over regulation. DOE just hired 3 new agents to check for anybody that's not adhering to the USDA regulations, EPA regulations, and all the other inspectors in the Bertrand watershed. So to say that there's not going to be adequate oversight over this, I think is a little far-fetched. And how could they not enforce it with the way they inspect ag already? And I mean, you heard farmers talk about there's people coming in creeks and kayaks looking at farms. There's people riding around on bikes taking soil samples. It's ridiculous. And then it seems a little hypocritical that have an over 10,000 square foot distillery in the ag zone, and to my knowledge, they don't have a solid waste permit. And what happens to their distillery leachate, I don't know. And then we've also heard some arguments that this is an up zone. Somebody read state code that this should be an accessory use. And we've went over and over that with going through this. We've talked about it. The state code says this is an accessory use. Why we can't do it is beyond me. And then someone else said scheduling. Until we can get grass to grow 24/7, 12 months a year, it's going to be awful difficult to schedule when we can butcher beef. It's not like going to the dentist. People don't understand agriculture when they start saying let's schedule it, because there's economies of scale that you've got to weigh into this factor. I mean, I can't believe the things that are being said. Now, that being said, some of the things that were said, I would look at. You know, if we want to reduce the size to, I have some amendments that I would propose to the size of these things, but then yet we've pretty much made this a non-factor with some of the other regulations that have been put in place that I would like to change. So with that being said, if we're ready to start working on this, I would make a motion that we approve it, and then I have some changes that I would like to suggest.
Okay, it's been moved for approval, and Councilmember Knutzen, we'll start with you.
Okay, first change I would say is on 114, number 1, the total allowable building area is no larger, on page 370.
Go ahead, Councilmember Knutzen.
Okay, on subsection 1 of 114, the total allowable building area is no larger than 10,000 square feet. We've heard some concern from some of the people that was too large. Okay, I propose that we compromise. We make that 7,000 square feet.
Is there any discussion on that motion to amend? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I guess that passes.
Okay,
7-0.
On 164, subsection 1, we've also heard some concern that was on page 371.
Next page.
On 164, subsection 1, same issue. We've heard some concern that was too large. The total allowable building area is larger than 10,000 square feet. Change that number to 7,000 square feet, and no larger than 20,000 square feet.
That just makes the code consistent. Any concerns on that? All right. Oh, you're changing from 30 to 20?
Changing that from 30 to 20.
And you're basing that on?
Some concern from folks that was too large, even though we did have a 30,000 square foot facility at one point at Ferry Brothers. But this isn't what we're proposing. There was some people saying that why call it a packing house? Well, they obviously didn't read the definitions, because EPA definitions state the difference between a packing house and a slaughterhouse, and there is a large difference. The difference is in a slaughterhouse, you're sending out quarters, and it's just whack them and stack them. I mean, you shoot them, you gut them, and then you skin them and you send them out. This is not what we're looking at here. We're looking at a packing house that will process this into a form that can go into the community, and there's a big difference between a packing house and a slaughterhouse. So we saw some concern. Let's make that 20,000 square feet.
Is there any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, next. We go to, on page 370, 114, subsection 4. Subsection 6, excuse me. The facility shall comply with solid waste handling standards as set forth in Whatcom County Code 173-350 is administered by the Whatcom County Health Department as adopted by reference in Whatcom County Code 24.06. Okay? And I would like to add an additional sentence to that. Unless an approved state waste discharge permit from the Washington State Department of Ecology that complies with WAC 173-216 and a disposal plan with an approved AD. And for those of you that don't know what an AD is, that's an anaerobic digester.
So I have a question about that. I've heard that our health department has got some concerns about jurisdiction on this particular item. You want to come up and address that, please?
Thank you. Jeff Hedges, Whatcom County Health Department. I think there were two parts to that question. One is independent of the language in Section 4. A facility, a packing house, would still be subject to 173-350.
There's subsection 4. They're still going to have to send out notices to this. You're talking subsection 6, where it talks about Whatcom County having jurisdiction.
Excuse me, yes, thank you, 6.
Yep.
The packing house is required to be in compliance with 173-350 solid waste management, independent of whether or not that section 6 is in there. And they're also required to be subject to WAC 173-216 for state waste discharge permit, independently of what might or might not be in here.
Right.
It's not an either-or type thing. One is solid waste would be for the management of the solid waste, and the Section 216 for state waste discharge would be for the processed wastewater management. And then regarding, I think, the third part of that question about the health department approving a waste management plan, there's really, as I mentioned in a memo, no legal jurisdiction or context in which we are allowed have authority to do that. What we do is make sure that they're compliant with the state law regarding management of solid waste. So we would provide technical assistance to them as much as they wanted to on how to be in compliance with the management of solid waste requirements. So but they don't bring a plan to us and then we would approve it or disapprove it.
Is the language as written then correctly stating your role?
Yes. As a matter of fact, this updated version is very correct. The only entities that we really would approve or disapprove a waste management plan are places like a landfill or a transfer station where state law gives us that legal authority.
Well, Councilmember Knutzen.
Okay.
Really Councilmember Brenner.
About what you're... Okay. Who does the approval? Is it Ecology? Who does the approval?
Ecology would approve the permit for state waste discharge for managing the process of wastewater.
Solid waste.
But for the solid waste, there is no approval or disapproval. You know, really, there's no companies out there that have to do a plan that we would approve or disapprove. Instead, we would look at whether or not they're in compliance with the state law with how to manage their solid waste.
So you would look at it after it's built? When do you look at it?
Well, actually, in this case, as a part of the permit for state waste discharge by ecology
Right.
to manage their processed wastewater. They also, as an aside, have to say how they're going to manage their solid waste. And now that's a plan that can change as long as it's in compliance with the state law, solid waste requirements.
But if they decide they want to change it, you're administering. If they decide they're going to change it to something that's not in compliance, what happens?
They can change their plan as long as it's in compliance.
What if they decide to change it and it's not in compliance?
Then they would be in violation of
Okay.
the solid waste handling requirements that the health department has jurisdiction for.
Okay.
Then my question was, what jurisdiction does the health department have over a berry, dairy, or a distillery?
Same thing. They're all have to be in compliance with WAC 173-350 solid waste.
Does the health department
handling
have
standards.
any administration role in that process?
Yes, we are the jurisdictional authority. It would be a health code violation and a violation of local and state law if they were not properly disposing of their solid waste.
So do you think that this needs to be in this ordinance? It doesn't sound like it's an added regulation. It sounds like it's expected no matter what.
Correct. It's already required that they be in compliance,
Right.
but it's not bad to have it in there
Okay.
either.
Okay. So, just a second.
I'm not done.
Councilmember Knutzen, did you want to withdraw that motion to
I'll
amend?
withdraw that one for now.
Okay.
Now, my last one was if we go to 114 on the top of page 371, where subsection 11, I would move that we delete that. The packing house is not located in a critical aquifer recharge area of high susceptibility as identified by the critical areas ordinance map. To me, we don't require any other ag use to adhere to this regulation. It was done in a hasty fashion, and the implications are that over 50% of the ag zone, this is not an approved use. You look at if you look at what's currently going on with the disposal in an AD, the amount of waste that's going to be coming out of one of these facilities is so minimal that you might as well require that there's no homes in the critical aquifer recharge area, because I would presume they would be producing more waste and be more of a risk. You look at the other ag uses that are in the ag zone that are currently situated on critical aquifer recharge areas, and I dare say you'd find a lot more hazardous uses. So I would make a motion that we remove number 11.
Excuse me, if I hear outbursts, I'll have to eject you from the meeting. That's the last warning. All right, Councilmember Brenner.
Okay, I need to find out something before. There were a couple things, and one of them relates to this. With dairies and their manure lagoon, that has to have a liner, right?
No.
Some kind of liner?
No.
No?
Correct.
It does?
Does not require a liner.
It does not require a liner. Okay. So, because I went and looked at where that digester is, and they do have their manure lagoon is lined.
Well, I think we're talking a number of different things here.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get to a point.
Right. Digesters are not packing houses. The processed wastewater from both of those
they have it
types
because they're a digester.
Well, they're both completely different facilities generating completely different processed wastewaters. And they're both regulated differently. Well, one generates a wastewater called digestate that's a nutrient that's allowed to be reapplied to the land as a nutrient. And the other is a wastewater from packing houses that is not a nutrient. It's disposed of to the ground. Okay, one uses, they're two different waste streams. Okay, so I think it's apples and oranges when we compare those. To respond to that issue about the recharge area, one thing I will say about state waste discharge permit is that the intent of it is to protect surface and groundwater from all impacts. It is rigorous. It is expensive. It is not trivial. It's not foolproof either. But when an entity applies for that permit, they typically, it's very technical. They need a consultant, and it's engineering, and it's best management practices, it's monitoring. Ferry Brothers, I think, had difficulty with it, which illustrates, that it's not trivial, but it is intended to be protective. And so, if there was an additional protection overlaid on that, that would be a policy this group could make. I'm not sure what the basis would be.
Well, okay, back to...
Well, I just want to correct one of the things you said. In other jurisdictions, it is handled the same as manure. It's spread on the ground, and it's used as a nutrient supplement to the soil. You look at the waste that comes out of these things, I think the mobile unit in Skagit County spreads it on the fields. As for disposal, not as an amendment to the soil. Well, there's not that much difference between the nutrient stream between manure and waste that comes out of a cow.
I still want to get back to... I went
Councilmember Brenner.
At one of the packing plant, and they they contain it in a tank, and then it's piped to a truck, I guess, that takes it to the digester. Mm-hmm. What if something like that? I mean, that it seemed very reasonable, and the people. It's
already being done.
So then
that Kaiser's.
Okay, so then that means there is no waste going, or offal, or whatever you call it, liquid. That's not going.
The blood and wash-down water can go to an anaerobic digester.
Okay. So we could have options then.
Well, blood, water, and everything but spinal column and brain.
Mm-hmm. No sheep carcass, no sheep carcass, cattle, right. Prohibited materials. But I was correct. There are some restrictions in the guidelines.
Yep.
So what I hear you saying is that the protections for the MPDS permit and the requirements to take care of the solid waste and the water and discharge from the processing of animals is pretty strict, and so having the additional restriction of prohibiting an aquifer recharge area is just another layer that you're saying we have to decide if we want that.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so Councilmember Knutzen has a motion on the floor.
Basically what you're saying with that is that 55% of the ag zone is not usable. So let's just say that now all of a sudden we're restricting this from being next to one of the digesters in the county where it could be directly piped into that facility. And all of a sudden now I'd say, looking at this map, it wouldn't be able to be put in one of those areas where a digester is.
That's what I was trying to get to. It could
Councilmember
say
Brenner.
This, or unless it's what is it called? Held in the tank and piped to it.
What other use is restricted similar to this?
What?
What other use is restricted similar to this?
I don't know. I'm not thinking of other uses. I'm thinking of something as in a concentrated area, and the one I saw had a tank, and they piped it to a truck that took it to the digester.
Yep.
So they all have to collect it and take it somewhere else. None of them can just
right.
Well, that's
going to be a requirement of their state waste discharge permit.
Okay, well that would take the place of having to do that then.
Right.
If it's not being, if none of it's going on the land at all. You said, I thought maybe I didn't understand you. I thought you said they can do that. I mean,
no,
I didn't know they.
What I'm saying is by leaving 11 in there, all of a sudden we're saying that this is restricted from 55% of the ag zone.
Well, can we put that wording in? I mean, maybe it's already in a WAC somewhere, but can we put the wording in that talks about that it's contained and piped to an approved disposal?
We already have that in Article 7, a state waste discharge permit from the Washington State Department of Ecology.
Well, that's fine, but I think something like this, remember how Jeff said, well, you don't have to have this in, but it's good to have it in? Maybe something like that is good to have in so people understand this isn't going into the ground.
Let's take care of the first motion, which is to remove 11, and then if there's additional language you want to substitute, we'll put it in.
Well, can't you do it as an amendment of taking that out and putting the other language in as one amendment?
No.
Can't do
Councilmember Crawford.
As long as the motion is to remove 11, I'm just wondering, was this, Josh, originally proposed by staff? Is that where this came from, or was this added by
that. Came from us.
committees or?
Came from,
We did it in committee.
Oh, so it was added by the council, and now the motion is
The
to take it
committee.
away by the council. And when the discussion was about adding this, weren't these same questions asked? And why was it felt by whoever supported that it was necessary, since our health department's saying it's really just a policy issue? There's all this regulatory stuff that's going to monitor this anyway. Can anyone explain that?
I will, because I was one who voted for it.
Councilmember Brenner.
I had not visited the plant yet, I admit it. But once I did and I saw what they do with it, that made sense to me. Whereas I didn't even realize there was any
So you're saying you
collection.
would not support it, the critical aquifer recharge area language today, and you will support removing it?
If we had that other language in, I know it's the law anyway, but I didn't know that. And I'd like to have it in there. The language about holding.
Was there anything else anybody,
Councilmember Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the end of number 7, it says, if required by the Washington State Department of Ecology. So is it possible that we could have a facility that would not need a state waste discharge permit that would be operating?
I don't think so. I think that even if they go to an anaerobic digester, because they would need to do pre-treatment, they would need a state waste discharge permit.
Okay.
So I'm not eliminating the possibility that under some unforeseen circumstance, a state waste discharge permit would not be required. There may be some circumstance. And so it's not bad to have that language in there if required. But you can't require them to get that permit if ecology says they don't need it.
No, I wouldn't want to.
So.
No.
But they're still overseen by the health department, and if you went out there and saw that they were discharging waste into the ground without any kind of plan, they'd be out of compliance, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
They wouldn't get that far.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Well, okay, but I can support removing that language if we have the part about, I think it's called a holding tank.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to remove item number 11 out of 114. Is there any other discussion?
Well, my vote depends on
I'll work something out here.
what?
I'll work something out on the next amendment.
Okay.
Barbara.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, that passes 5-2
Okay.
with Councilmembers Knutzen, Kershner, Brenner, Kremen, and Crawford in favor.
Okay, and then
Can we also remove it from?
Well, let's make the other thing first.
well, yeah, let's
before
remove
I
it.
go vote
Yeah,
for
well, we
something.
might as well. I would propose that let's remove it in the other number 10 on subsection
Okay.
164, page 372.
Same thing.
Same thing.
All right, is there any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, Councilmember Kremen.
Well, I just want a clarification from the maker of the motion. Right before we voted, you said that you were going to come up.
I'll just, on subsection 7, I will add that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay.
Councilmember Mann, what were you?
No.
No. Okay, that one passes 5-2. Councilmember Weimer and Mann opposed.
Okay, and then now we might as well do both of them at once. It's the wording is slightly different on 5, so I'm going to. All right, on page 370, 114, subsection 7.
370, 114, subsection what?
Subsection 7 under 114.
Okay.
An approved state waste discharge permit from the Washington State Department of Ecology with adequate storage for waste that complies with WAC 173.
Okay.
with
that do
adequate,
it,
so add
Jeff?
with adequate storage for waste.
How about with adequate storage for waste where required?
Yeah, for
Okay,
all waste.
With adequate storage for waste where required.
For all waste.
Well, no, because there's you're going to have a different waste stream.
Waste is.
No,
yeah,
you're going to
but-
have spinal column and other things that are going to probably be stored in
If I could comment on that.
Yeah.
In the permit application, that would already be
I understand
an
that,
application
but
requirement to have adequate storage.
I know, I understand that. I just want to put it in there because I think some
Because
council members want to hear it.
I want to hear it.
Okay.
It just, people brought it up a lot, and I would like to make sure that they understand there is nothing going into the ground there.
Okay, so an improved state waste discharge permit from the Washington State Department of Ecology that complies with with the WACs. After Department of Ecology, insert, what was the wording, Councilmember Crawford?
With adequate storage where required.
With adequate storage where required that complies with the WACs.
That would do it?
Are we clear on that?
Yeah.
I didn't see a nod from staff. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Any discussion on that item? Councilmember Mann?
Seems a little redundant, but
I like redundancy on this stuff.
okay.
Can I make I'm sorry, Barbara, we're looking at each other. May I make a clarification?
Sure.
On that? When you said adequate storage so people know nothing's going on the ground, under state waste discharge permit, they would store it, they would treat it and store it, and it would go then into the ground.
Well, that's not what this place I went to did. It shipped it.
Versus if it went to an anaerobic digester, first it would go into storage,
right,
and then to the anaerobic digester. So they have two options there.
Yeah.
Okay, one would be to pre-treat it, do pathogen reduction, knock down the BOD, settle out the solids, that kind of thing, right? And then it would infiltrate into the ground.
Well, you know what? I really like the idea of it being contained and shipped to a digester. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. And the people who were really opposed to this language, some of who I talked to, after I saw that, when I talked to some of them, they go, well, yeah, that makes sense. So I'm not thinking this is anything that people think is out of line. Like I said, it was like that at the place I went to. So.
And that would be the option. They could do that also. It would be kind of, supply and demand and competitive pricing and that kind of thing.
Okay. So, and then now, have we voted on this one yet?
No, we have a motion on the table, and I'm going to speak against it, not because I don't agree that the waste needs to be contained and managed appropriately. I think that the language already in the ordinance covers that, and I think by adding language to a already very long sentence could be more confusing and possibly not good legislation. So I'm going to speak again. I'm going to vote against that. Councilmember Mann.
Just to back up a little bit, in number 6 and 7, these subsections that list the WACs and the different requirements by the state, we didn't put those in there to create additional layers of regulations. We put those in there so that folks who are coming to apply for a permit would know what they were up against, because we weren't convinced that the communication levels between staff and various departments was sufficient enough for them to even know about these things. And as we've all said many times, it's extremely frustrating and something we have to avoid, that if someone comes in for a permit at one department, they get an answer, and then there's another department that contradicts them, or the answer changes the next time. We wanted to get everything up front. So we did not want to add any regulations. We just wanted to list them so people knew what they were facing. So I agree with the chair that adding some language here that isn't necessary just further sort of complicates and convolutes things. And I'm always for simpler language and simpler guidance. And so I'm going to speak against it because I don't think it's necessary, not because I don't support the intent.
Councilmember Brenner.
Well, that was, of all the issues that were brought up tonight of people with concerns, the biggest concern was water quality. There were lots of others, but that was the biggest one. I really think by putting the language in there clear as a bell, even if it's redundant, rather than making them go look up the wax and go do this and go do that, I think it would make things clearer to them, and that's okay too.
Yeah, we can disagree on that.
Okay. Any further discussion on Councilmember Brenner's motion to include, or Councilmember Knutsen's motion to include additional language? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. All right.
No.
Fails 4-3.
Okay, that failed 4-3, but I don't know who voted.
He was an aye.
All right,
score.
with Councilmembers Mann, Kershner,
I was an aye.
I was an aye.
I was an aye.
and
4-3.
Crawford opposed. So that passed. Okay. Thank you very much.
And then we would have to do the same thing on subsection 164 on page 371. After Department of Ecology on subsection 5, an approved state waste discharge permit from the Washington State Department of Ecology with adequate storage when required that complies with WAC. Are we familiar on that?
So it's the same thing, but just for the conditional use.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, that passed 5-2 this time. Councilmember Crawford moved over.
We moved him
in the
over.
dark.
All right.
In my defense, I don't think we should have one section of the code inconsistent
That's
with
fair.
another.
That's true. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next off.
Wait a second. That passed 5-2. Councilmember Mann and Kershner opposed. Councilmember Knutzen.
All right. Next is 114, page 370, subsection 2. This facility processes at least 75% agriculture goods produced in Whatcom, Skagit, and/or Island County that originated from uses permitted in Whatcom County.
And/or Island County.
Thank you. I was going to make that motion, so thank you for doing that. I'll support that.
Well, then you need to take this first "or" out, comma, just Whatcom.
That's what I said. Whatcom, Skagit, and/or Island County.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. Is there any discussion on that item? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, that passes 6-1 with Councilmember Weimer opposed.
Okay, and same thing on 164, subsection 2.
Wait a minute. Okay, 1-6.
It's page 371.
Okay.
All right. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Councilmember Weimer doesn't want to have. Oh, never mind. That's 6-1. I guess he didn't have the same issue. All right, Councilmember Knutzen, any more?
We heard a lot of complaints about the holding pens being kind of vague, and
I have a motion for that.
okay, good.
Holding pens associated with packing houses shall be limited to that necessary to accommodate animals intended for processing within 24 hours.
Well, the only problem with that is I just don't know if that's enough time. But by the time you haul animals in, and we're talking a small scale packing house here. We're not talking some large scale facility that's going to be processing animals at a rapid rate. I just don't know if 24 hours would be adequate.
About 48.
I would think at least 48.
I'll take that as a friendly amendment. 48 hours. So that's 2 full days. So if a operator had equipment that went down or something that interrupted his or her process, they could make arrangements to have the animals moved off and out of the holding pen. Councilmember Brenner?
I do have a question. Because like they said, it's going to be a small amount. So if somebody's equipment breaks down and they can't do it, and they've got these cows, they can't do it, could there be something in there that would say, because I'm hoping they get it fixed in 48 hours, but could there be something in there that talks about contacting the health department for a waiver for a certain length of time? They couldn't accept anymore, but they could get a waiver to be able to keep the cows there till they fix it.
Well, that the processed wastewater quantity and treatment.
Right.
And, they are still going to have adequate facilities to manage that livestock for that holding period.
Right.
Without impacting surface or groundwater.
Right.
So that they have to plan around that. They have to be able to do that. It's a requirement of their permit. So I think it would be onerous to have to call anyone to check in on them.
Okay.
All right. So my motion to amend is 48 hours. And Councilmember Mann.
Could we just help us out with a little math here? I'm just trying to get an idea of how many animals we're talking about. If we've got a 7,000 square foot facility, how many animals a day are we slaughtering? Just ballpark, and then times 2 days. I don't have.
Kaiser's does what? What does Kaiser's do?
They're not 7,000.
Yeah.
Their kill floor is like 800 square feet, though, right?
Right, but they do what? A couple hundred a year. I forget what the number was. What?
10 a day.
10.
Okay, you need to come up here and speak into the microphone.
In Cowlitz County, they have an 800 square foot kill floor, and they can do 300 a day.
On an 800 square foot kill floor,
it's a matter of efficiency and operational setup.
Kaiser's is permitted for 2,000 animals a year through their USDA certification. So, and Linden meets and Columbia, there was only 800 done there with Linden, Columbia, So you're permitted for 2,000 animals a year currently with USDA. I don't know what, I think they'd probably be regulated by their USDA permit how many animals they could do per year, similar to what Kaiser's is already.
Did you say? I'm sorry.
Councilmember Crawford.
Did you say Kaiser does up to 300 per day?
No. This is a facility in Cowlitz County.
What's their holding area look like? Is it like a huge,
I haven't been there. I talked to the consultant.
300 head of cattle in this gigantic.
This was when I presented the committee. I talked to a consultant that does the engineering for some of these facilities, and was given that loose data.
Because 300, I apologize to Wes Kinch and Roger Weimer and all these guys. I don't know. It seems like a holding facility for 300 cattle is kind of big. I mean, it's just my instinct.
Well, that's Cowlitz County. That's not the one. That's not the seven. That's not the one.
I was just sort of picturing this was going to be a little bit smaller scale.
Let's just do the motion.
Yep.
Okay, so the motion is for 48 hours.
Yep.
All right. Any further discussion?
I'm just still trying to put together the 48-hour limitation with a 7,000 square foot facility. Is this? Do these numbers jive, or we can't figure it out?
It seems kind of arbitrary to me too right now.
Yeah, it is arbitrary. So 2 days, 1 day.
I mean, I like the idea of 48 hours because it feels right. Again, it's more of a feeling than a scientific deduction, but that in itself will be limiting to some degree. And also, we've heard a lot about feedlot operations, and yes, I have driven through Dodge City, and I know what a feedlot looks like, and that's not what we're talking about here. And I want to make sure that that's not what we're talking about, that somehow some of the other things have been said, that somehow Canadians are going to send all their cattle to Whatcom County now to get slaughtered. So I like the 48-hour restriction. I just want to make sure that's realistic for the size of facility that we're talking about.
Well, I do know the facility in Sunnyside keeps those things for months.
Yeah.
We're not talking about feedlots because it's my understanding they're not allowed in Whatcom County. Is that correct? I don't think feedlots are allowed.
I think we're getting.
Why don't we just say it? Feedlots are not allowed.
That comes back to the things that are listed somewhere in the code as a permitted use, and where they're silent, they could fall under that. All other things are prohibited.
That's true.
Yeah. So there is no outright statement that feedlots are prohibited.
Correct.
Okay.
But I believe that the code is also silent on them and permitted uses.
Yeah, but people don't know.
I don't have my zoning code with me.
Right.
Why don't we just say it?
Okay. Councilmember Kremen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh, where did the word immediate originate?
In this committee.
I'm pretty sure it was in committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we knew what we meant, but
I think it was one of those.
Because I'd like to get some sort of a
we didn't want
idea of what the intent was.
To avoid feedlots.
There was
exactly.
There was no holding pens on the last ordinance we worked on. This was added last time.
So that's why we did it. And if we put a time frame, that takes care of it.
Is there any chance, Madam Chair, we could ask a cattleman to come up and explain what happens at these places and how long they hold the cows? I mean, I'm just kind of curious. I don't know.
Well,
if
we
they
got Mr. Claycamp back there. He would probably be better to answer something like that if he was willing.
Bring him down.
Yeah, but then other people can.
We could. We're open. No. We did.
USDA already has a requirement saying that if you keep the animals in the pens more than 24 hours, you have to feed them. So almost all slaughterhouses only keep them for 24 hours. A 7,000 square foot slaughterhouse would probably, by most standards, and I've visited a lot of them now, would do about 30 beef equivalent, which means 30 beef, or if you did that by weight, that could be times about 5 for lamb, so 150 lamb. But most likely, most slaughterhouses are going to be set up for beef. So figure 30. So if you had your 48 hours, you'd have 60. 60 animals can easily be put into 60 beef, 600 square feet pens. The slaughterhouses that do 50 beef a day that I've visited have pens that are less than 1,000 square feet total. And they do 50 a day, and they can flex up to 75 in case there's a big delivery, and some would be left overnight, fed, and then done the next morning.
So 24 hours seems adequate.
24 is the common because of the feeding requirement. Because slaughterhouses aren't engaged in the business of feeding, and it creates more waste. The more you feed them, the more poop we have. So they don't feed them. They process them very quickly. 24 to 48 is fine.
So I'll modify my
Quick question.
Councilmember Weimer.
I'm trying to jive your numbers with what Mr. Hedges has said about an 800 square foot kill floor that has 300 a day.
That is amazing. That directly contradicts 3 years of research on my part.
Are they a slaughterhouse?
I'm not they are a slaughterhouse, and to my knowledge, that plant is about 30,000 square feet.
So they're just
Shank Pack in Stanwood is 36,000 square feet, and they do 340 a day. So the 300 beef is a lot of beef.
Okay,
that's a big
but under
plant.
the way this is written now, that could be 600 cattle somewhere a day.
From a large plant, like something that's beyond the size of the scope of this amendment. Now it's down to 20,000 square feet. Right. And Shank is more of a turn and burn. It's a grinder, so they are very high volume. Most plants that are packing houses would do much less out of that same square footage.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will amend my amended motion and take it back to 24 hours. Councilmember Mann.
I'm glad we got actual a criteria by which to base our criteria on. But that brought up another question for me. Do we say anywhere in this ordinance that it has to be a USDA slaughterhouse? Okay, so any USDA regulations that we rely on to guide our design here aren't necessarily going to apply. Could you talk to the mic about that?
I can speak to that.
There is nothing in this ordinance that requires it to be a USDA facility. It could be a custom facility, which is, where if you buy a quarter cow from a farmer, you technically own it, so they're not selling it to you, therefore it doesn't need to be USDA approved.
Right, and I'm open to. I've bought quarter cows before, so I'm open to that kind of.
You have to buy a live animal, and then with the other, it's already allowed in the ag zone to put together something like that, is my understanding, because I know they've been there. You've got Clanders, you've got Morgan's, you've got Columbia Valley, you've got all those places that were in the ag zone before. I don't know if they're not still there, but the USDA facility that's the whole reason behind this is because they'll be able to sell their product. They won't have to sell a live animal. So
That's great, but my point is that, and Mr. Claycamp gave a great answer, and I'm appreciative of that information. I think it's completely worthwhile, but it posed the question, as if like the reason we would do 24 hours is because these are all going to be USDA certified. They're not necessarily going to all be USDA certified. They're not necessarily going to be, unless you want to require them to be. But so therefore, maybe some facilities would want 48 hours, or 72, or 96. Who knows?
I think I'll keep my motion to amend at 24 hours.
Any
further discussion on that item? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes 7-0, and I'll make the same motion on item number 3 under 164? Yeah, under 164, conditional use. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes 7-0. Okay. Anybody else have any more motions? Councilmember Weimer.
Actually, I have a question. And it's we heard a lot about water availability, and I don't remember. I think maybe Mr. Hedges just talked about this when he came to us. Can a packing house operate on the 5,000 gallon exemption, or do they have to actually be hooked up to water?
My understanding is that unless they have a water right, they're subject to the 5,000 for exempt well.
But I think this is a business. Can you run a business on an exempt? I thought that was only for household.
It's a good question. I don't have the answer to that.
Josh does.
He better.
And speaking with Charles Sullivan months ago, you could create the exempt well, and then you have to, I don't know, publicize it, convert it into a Group A or Group B. I'm not positive which ones, but you could do it on an exempt well, and then that you would make public. You would still, yes, you would still be limited to 5,000 gallons a day.
Okay, I've got a question. Where did they send the, let's see, stamped envelopes with typed addresses to each property owner within 1,000 feet of the boundaries of the subject property come for under the accessory uses?
What number?
Number 4. What was the thinking of that?
It's required. It wasn't?
Is it required?
It's not required for accessory use. I think the idea there was so that it's as part of a conditional use permit, it is required.
So I'll move to remove that section.
Do you have the history of why it's under accessory in this case?
I believe it was.
We went back and forth between administrative permit and it's not required under administrative.
It would be.
Yeah. So that's. I think that's why we went back and forth. So.
But I don't see it in the conditional use one.
It's a requirement of a conditional use, whether it's a process.
Okay.
So
it is.
So if you go to Title 20, 82 or 84, wherever you find the criteria for conditional use, one of the criteria is mailing to neighbors within 1,000 feet. And I think this was a holdover from the accessory versus administrative approval and letting the neighbors know, giving them notice that one could be going in next to them.
But
Councilmember Crawford.
But under the accessory use process, there's nothing they do about that, is there? I mean, it's saying send all the neighbors the public notice with a stamped. No. I guess the stamped envelopes are given to planning to send to all the neighbors. That's why you do them. Mm-hmm. And they're just notified. They're not asked for an opinion.
Generally, yeah. Okay. So, do we do that? No, not that I know of.
I guess I'm concerned about that there's no process for input and we're notifying them. And that seems a little strange.
They could appeal the building permit. There is a pathway to do that for any building permit. Somebody could appeal that. I don't know what criteria or who that gets appealed to.
Okay, Councilmember Kremen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see anything wrong with disclosure. I mean, I think there's really no reason not to do it. Yeah, and I think it just is more. There's more transparency, and I think that would be the prudent thing to do.
And I agree with you. I have nothing wrong with disclosure. However, this particular disclosure doesn't give an outlet or venue for somebody that would have a concern other than to appeal the building permit. And so I would imagine that every building permit that went in could potentially be appealed. And because we're doing this under accessory use, and it's not a requirement, under conditional use it is, and that's why we have it under conditional use, so it goes through the conditions of the permit. So I'm just thinking. Councilmember Crawford?
The other aspect to that would be, I believe, again, this is something that's set up for public input. An appeal process, I believe, requires a fee to be paid. In other words, you'd be notifying them that if you don't like it, see, I don't know what you're notifying them of. I mean, I like the idea, and I understand what you're saying. It's nice to let your neighbors know you might have a slaughterhouse operation going in, but I'm still trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with that information.
Are you asking me?
Well, it seems like you'd almost have to follow this up with saying, well, you can't do anything about it now because it's allowed. It's an accessory use. However, you could appeal, but it's a $300 fee to go appeal once, and you can only appeal after the building permit's been issued. It just seems like a strange thing to notify people of.
Well, had Josh not said that the route could be taken to appeal the building permit, then I have to concur that there really would be no point. But the fact that there is the potential for the informed neighbor to appeal the building permit, or do we send out a notification for the building permit? No, we don't. So I do think that there is a purpose. There's. I really do think that there's a reason to inform the neighbors within, how far is it? 1,000 feet. And I don't see anything wrong with it, and I do think that there is the potential for a concerned neighbor to, have an opportunity to, to appeal. So I really think we ought to leave that language in.
Okay. I will withdraw my motion to remove that. Councilmember Weimer?
I guess reading that section 4, it says that they have to turn in those envelopes. It doesn't say the envelopes go anywhere. So shouldn't we add at least that PDS will mail them?
Well, this is boilerplate for.
No, I don't think. I think other parts of I think the other conditional use has more specific language about what happens with the envelopes after they're turned in. I'm going by memory, but you've got your magic iPad there. Tell me.
Yeah, I think it's. Well, give me a couple minutes, okay?
So let's talk about some other parts while he's doing that.
Councilmember Mann?
This is kind of related. I have thought all along that we should have this as a conditional use at all sizes, but frankly, I was very surprised to learn today that I've been operating under the assumption that these were already allowed in light industrial and high-impact industrial. So the fact that they're not is incredibly new and surprising information to me, so it really adjusts my thinking. But based on all the comment we've had and people worried about the water and their if you're an organic farm and the water supply gets contaminated and all these things, that you lose your organic certification. Lots of other concerns. I would still advocate not for a conditional use permit on these smaller ones, this up to 7,000 square feet, but for an administrative permit. I still think it's a clearer process, and it just gives us more ability to enforce the rules as opposed to just sending letters which don't necessarily result in compliance. So I think there are still legitimate concerns about how these things operate and dispose of the waste, whether or not they have all the proper permits. And I think an accessory use is not, doesn't give the community enough backbone to enforce any of this. So I would move that we put this back in administrative use. I don't expect it's going to pass, but I just want to get that out there now while it's seems somewhat germane since we're talking about notifications.
Council and audience, I'm really sorry. I'm having I'm not feeling very well, and I feel like I need to leave the council chamber. So I'm going to turn this over to Councilmember Knutzen, please.